to Embracing Your Mortality podcast with me, author Sue Brain. Now, I keep on saying if we want to create a better way of living, I believe engaging with our mortality is essential because it reminds us that life is finite. And we need to make the very best of who we are so we can contribute something worthwhile to the world around us. And my guest today, who's Kate Bidstrup, does exactly this as she travels through the Australian outback with her husband Tim Gentle on a brightly coloured coach called Rocky, using storytelling and the latest AI technology to educate children and adults about where their food and fibre comes from and to inspire them to enter into the Australian food industry. So welcome, Kat. So just tell me, how did this amazing vision start for you?
Well, it's funny. So it's not like there was a huge thunderbolt for us, though Tim does tell the story that about, maybe 20 years ago, he was doing a workshop and he was asked to visualize what his future might look like. And funnily enough, he drew a picture of a van which had a satellite on top, and it was traveling around the outback teaching people about digital technology. So maybe 10 years after that, there was a Facebook competition that said, what would you do if you won a bus? And Tim entered the Facebook competition and in 100 words or less said that he would turn it into a mobile classroom and travel around regional Australia teaching people about digital technology. And then he won the bus. And so we very quickly had to work out how to drive a bus. But also
Huge,
then
the pictures of it are
massive. Yeah, it's like a proper coach.
Yeah.
And he took it down to his dad's farm and he pulled out all of the seats and he transformed it into a mobile classroom.
Amazing.
And so it was incredible. It's serendipitous, but it's also, I guess, that way of, where the mind goes, energy flows. And he really put that out there. He entered in a competition and before you know it, we had this bus. And that was, really, I guess, the starting point of what our business is today.
Now, I know that you go to the outback. There's various parts of your business, but I'm very interested in how you also are educating children about where food comes from. And I find that kind of distressing that we need to do that. And I had an experience the other day, not so long ago, with somebody who said their nephew thought that carrots grew on trees.
Yes, it's terrifying, isn't it?
It's terrifying. So just tell me a little bit about what you do and how you educate people or the kids particularly about where their food comes from.
Yeah, sure. Well, I'm a farm girl myself, so I am very well connected with how food is produced. And, I guess what we've noticed and what you've pointed out as well is that there's a real disconnect between people understanding how their food is produced and the choices they make about what they eat. And we know for a fact that children who don't know about how fresh food is grown often won't even choose to try it because it feels very foreign to them. It's very different than how it used to be, where that made up the majority of what we ate. So for us, it was a two-pronged approach. One is that we really wanted to educate children about how food is produced and hopefully help them to make better food choices and, maybe alleviate some of the childhood obesity as well as some of the other diseases and issues that come about from people not eating well. Yeah. But equally, we wanted to really support our farmers in getting people to understand just the love and care and attention that goes into producing the food that we eat, whether that be vegetables or fruit. There's a lot that goes into that, but also meat products. So people who are eating meat products, I think it's really important to understand the choices that you make impact the ethical decisions around how that food is produced.
I think it's really, I've been thinking a lot about this recently, how we just take those of us that go to a supermarket, and we all go to supermarket, this is modern day, but this sense of just going to the supermarket, buying whatever you're buying, and then just shoveling it down your gob without making it a sort of sacred experience in a way. That doesn't sound a bit too new agey, or at least honouring what we're eating, or like in the old days, not so long ago, certainly in my lifetime, we always used to say grace round the table. And just to say thank you for the food, whether it was for God or whatever thing. And I just think we've forgotten that, bringing that sense of, is it the spiritual? Is it just being grateful for what we have? To bring that back. And I feel like what you're doing is educating children to understand the importance of what they're eating. Is that right?
That is a really interesting way of looking at it, Sue. And I don't know that I've looked at it in quite that level of detail before, but you're right. We don't, necessarily think about the food and the whole journey that it's taken in order for us to enjoy it. Certainly not necessarily around that kitchen table. And I suppose the way that we have tackled it is by using virtual reality. That's a really great way that we have used technology. Kids love technology, we know that. Kids hate being told that they're about to learn something and to sit down and now you're going to learn about how your food is produced. So, they switch off straight away. So we trick them by having technology. And they're very excited to jump on a bus, and they're extremely excited to put on a VR headset. And before you know it, they're meeting the farmer and they're learning about what goes into growing carrots and why seasonality is important. And if you want to buy food in season, it's going to taste better and it's going to be less expensive, and food miles. And oh, there's a farmer there and she's got a child and she's balancing her life, so it becomes this really rich story that is delivered through technology, so that the kids take off the headset and they invariably go, wow, that was amazing. Or, I'm going to go and try avocado. I've never tried it before, or whatever it might be. And for me, that's the win there.
Yes, I suppose it's sort of exciting their imagination as well. I mean, there's a big thing going on about AI, isn't it? There's a lot of fear knocking around about how AI is going to take over our brains and we're going to all have things implanted into us and goodness knows what. But for me, it seems like that you're using AI in such a positive way. This is such an example of how to use AI to help to educate us well.
Yes, well, AI is a slightly different technology. So just to get everybody all on the same page, VR, virtual reality, that is when we use a VR headset and people put it on, and we have either filmed or created a CGI environment that is like a linear experience for them. And that's what VR is. AR, augmented reality, is when we might have a digital object in the real world, something like a Pokemon Go. You might be familiar with that from a few years ago. And then AI, artificial intelligence, is when we can use that machine learning. And so what I'm talking about with the VR doesn't incorporate the AI, but we are actually creating an AI product as well, which I'm happy to talk to you about if that's of interest.
Definitely. Please explain it.
Yep. So the AI product that we're working on at the moment in Australia, and I'm not sure where your listeners are, but in Australia, we have a vast northern area, which is not vastly populated. There's very few people and there's a whole lot of cattle and a whole lot of coastline. And the benefit of being an island nation like the UK is that we don't have the spread or the quick spread of emergency animal diseases. But importantly, we need to capture those emergency animal diseases as quickly as we possibly can. So we're creating a product that uses a forward-facing camera on your mobile device.
Yeah.
If you see a cow that is looking unusual or unhealthy, you can take a photo of that, and that runs an algorithm back through the machine learning that we've created that says, this is a 78% chance of being foot and mouth disease. Contact your vet. Or so that is how we're using the AI to help producers, particularly remote, get some instant information that they can then act on, because it might take 2 or 3 days to get a vet out there.
I mean, just looking at the photographs of the bus in Australia going down this amazing, huge road. I mean, we just don't have that.
No,
it's
true.
So tiny. And I love the idea of going out into we don't have an outback here. We might have the odd hillock somewhere, but we don't have an outback. Or we have Wales and we have Scotland, but it's hardly the same. But I just love the idea of you going into the outback and I guess, to communities that actually don't get out that much. Would that
Yeah, and
be
that
fair
is,
to say?
that's true. That's one of, there's a particular project that we're working on at the moment that I really love, and that is around how can we use some of this technology to help provide training for Indigenous cattle station workers, for example. So these people might be 7 or 8 hours away from their closest township, their regional centre, where you might naturally go to receive training. And so it's just not practical to go there for training about biosecurity, for example. So we've been working with them to create some tools and training that uses peer-to-peer learning, because our Indigenous culture is very much centred on storytelling. So we've found some amazing storytellers to help share their knowledge about what they do on their properties. And we've created tools that they can access back at the station. So we're leaning into some of those preferences and providing it in a way that doesn't involve having to travel.
So how do you find the storytellers that can relate to the population that you're working with? Where do they, are they in their communities, or are they Indigenous as well?
Yeah, absolutely. No, definitely Indigenous.
Yeah.
And the ones that we tend to find, so there is a big working group that we're part of for this particular project. And within there, naturally, you find the great storytellers. And we specialise, I suppose, in working with people who aren't talent, who aren't actors, who might not have ever been in front of a camera before, who have definitely never seen a 360 camera. And that's one of the things that Tim and I really love doing, is helping people share their story.
Oh, that's absolutely. And then I suppose they love what you're doing, and that you're then taking their story into a remote area. And
That's right.
yeah, it's just lovely, isn't it? The whole concept of, just think what you're doing is absolutely amazing. So tell me more about the education, and you're educating people about where their food comes from, but you're also focusing on fibre. What do you mean by that?
Well, it's probably more a way of explaining the different industries here in Australia. So when we say, some people will just say agriculture, and that encompasses everything. And we will say food and fibre, because we do some work with forestry, for example, around how we create paper. Or Cotton Australia might do a project around how cotton is created. Our industries tend to be more the food and the animal side of things, but we do also do some work in those areas as well. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So you're talking about fibre as in paper, as in,
Yeah, or fibre as in cotton or
right.
paper, or yeah.
And that's
It's
again,
just, I think it might be an Australian thing, how we break down our
yes,
industries and
yes.
talk about food and fibre industries.
Right.
Not fibre as in fibrous food.
And that's explaining, again, educating people, like, you're putting cotton on. Do you know where it's from? You're
Yeah,
using a
that's
piece
right.
of paper. Do you understand where this is made from?
Yeah, that's right. And certainly tying it into the Australian curriculum. So a lot of the work that we do is working with organisations, and there are some great organisations here in Australia who are really focused on tying in agricultural content and aligning it to the Australian curriculum, so that teachers can easily pick up these resources and use them.
And I think you're so right about kids don't really want to learn, especially when they're in school. There is a sort of resistance for a lot of children, and to bring in the AI or the virtual goggles, or whatever
Yeah.
is, I mean, I can only imagine if they've never put them. I put them on. I've only put them on once in my life. I was staggered, because I wanted them
Yes.
right round. I kept on turning round and I go, oh my
Yes.
God, I really am in this virtual weird world. I mean, do you ever, or is it a concern of you that people are getting hooked on virtual reality and it isn't real? And they might prefer to wear the goggles rather than go and visit the farm.
Well, not so much the goggles versus visiting the farm, because unfortunately, not like even when I grew up, I was the country kid and my city cousins used to come to the farm. And that was a real thing in Australia. The city cousins would go and visit the country cousins and they'd learn about agriculture, and that's how they would learn. And it just doesn't happen anymore. You either don't have those family connections, or there's biosecurity and all sorts of reasons as to why it's not practical to take large number of city kids onto a property. So in answer to the use of VR for that, I think it's fantastic. I am a mum though, with 5 kids. And so of course I worry about the use of technology and kids using it instead of experiencing real world. So I suppose it's about trying to find that balance between introduction and then tangible. And I suppose when we're doing particularly food and fruit and veg, it can be quickly very tangible because they take off those headsets and they invariably go to the supermarket.
Yes, yes, I can understand that. I suppose what it is how to have a healthy balance, isn't it? I mean, technology is going to explode. It is exploding. We can't ignore that. It's just the way life is going to unfold. And I guess it's how you're finding a balance between stimulating children to look at things differently using technology and then introducing them to the actual product.
Yeah, that's right. A lot of it, a lot of the projects that we do at the moment are around skills, learning skills for agriculture. I want to go and work with large animals. I don't know how to work around a cow. So we've created a large animal handling simulator where they put on the headset and they learn about the flight zones and how to safely move cattle through the yards. Now, the reality is you can't get a job doing that in VR. You have to take off that headset and you have to go and learn in the yards how to do it. So I see it very much as a complementary tool to real life or to real learning and hands-on learning. But of course, like any technology, there are games and things that keep people in that world probably longer than they need to be.
Yeah, there is a danger of addiction, isn't there, or wanting to escape the reality of life, which is tough. You know, it's a tough old journey here as far as I'm concerned. And yes, and I think most people will agree with me on that one, actually. But it is that sort of understanding or the balance of that, isn't it? And how to get that right. And I think that's going to be the great test for us all, is how to get the balance of this modern technology with the reality of living in the everyday life. What I love to hear about the simulator is I can imagine then kids or young kids might be really, really encouraged to think about agriculture in a different way if they're on the simulator.
Yes, and that's exactly right. We're trying to show kids that agriculture as an industry has moved beyond being dirty old farm boots and farmers with a bit of hay hanging out of their mouth. It's actually quite a sophisticated industry, and we need more people working in it. You know, if you're interested in engineering, agriculture needs you. If you're interested in electrical, agriculture needs you. You know, there are roles within agriculture that are incredibly diverse and very sophisticated, and we're trying to show that.
Yeah, because it's right across the spectrum. It's from science to being a manual, you know, mending machine.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, yeah, and I think that's again, because we have the same image of, I mean, our farmers, I don't know about what your farmers are going through, but in the UK, they're having a terrible time. A lot of it to do with climate change, but also, I'm not going to go into the politics of it, but a lot of things happened a few years ago that has completely changed their relationship with agriculture and what they can do and what they can't do. I just, you know, I just find it so sad that we're so out of touch with nature. We're so out of touch with where our food comes from that we don't honor the people that provide it.
I think that's a really good point that you make. And actually, interestingly, circling back to the comment that you made about, you know, taking people almost like a little bit of escape from their real world, I know that VR has been used quite effectively in aged care facilities. And they are using it for people who have physical impairments that are preventing them from being able to go and experience particular things, like lying in the rainforest, for example. You can actually recreate some of those experiences. And perhaps one of the most touching ones that happened for us was just presented at a conference, and I got off the stage and someone came up to Tim and I and said, "Oh, did you create Farm VR?" which is one of our products. And Tim said, "Oh yeah, yep, I built Farm VR." She said, "Oh, well, this is crazy, but I run an aged care facility." And we had a gentleman who was in quite advanced stages of dementia and was behaving, he was very agitated, and, possibly some of your listeners can relate to caring for people who are at that stage of dementia. He was a farmer. And so they popped on one of our experiences, which was around being on a farm. And he immediately settled and absolutely loved it, and took off the headset and had tears in his eyes and said, "Oh, I remember, was very connected. I remember when I did X, Y, Z," and was taken to that place. And she said it was the most incredible experience for her. And that, for me, despite all of the other business that we do, we didn't even build it for that purpose.
Yes.
Was possibly one that's touched me the most deeply.
What a lovely story. So I guess his agitation is that he's out of his environment that he's known all his life, and he's completely confused by it and disconnected.
And so that took him back.
Isn't that that's a lovely story. I'm just conscious of time, Kat. Is there something that you would like to say about how we can reconnect with the food, how we can educate ourselves? We all need educating about food. It doesn't matter how old we are. And because I can certainly get stuck into, I'll just get the plastic bag full of, whatever out of the fridge and then bung it in my bowl, and that's it. Is there something you'd like to say about, to inspire us to look at it all in a different way, or a more open way?
Well, I suppose some of the products that we've created that I've seen some real success in cutting through some of those barriers have been things where we have demonstrated something like growing food from scraps. We created a little AR tool where you could hover over a thing and it showed what it looks like if you grew celery from scraps. So if you just cut off the bottom of your celery, like most of us do, and chuck it in the bin, off it goes. But if you cut off the bottom of your celery and pop it in a bit of water on your windowsill, it'll start growing new celery. And so we created something that showed what that would look like and then encouraged the kids to do it. And I know for a fact that in the classrooms around where we'd been testing this, they all had celery growing in their classroom. And so I think making it tangible, yes, have the AR, I can see what's going to happen with that and I get the learning outcome, but then actually doing some of the physical activities, connecting people to food through growing it and cooking with it and sampling it, I think is a really powerful way of bringing back some of the spirituality that you mentioned, Sue, or, creating those beautiful ties.
Yeah, just being grateful for it. I mean, it's spring here. I know it's autumn with you, but it's spring here. And nothing gives me greater pleasure than sowing seeds. And from this tiny little thing, suddenly this incredible plant grows. And just, how does that happen?
It's wonderful, isn't it? Exactly. And similarly, if you overwater it or you put it in the wrong spot or you do something, it will die. And that's also really useful for kids to learn about.
Yes.
That, the conditions that things grow in are different. And, you can apply that to yourself as well. Everybody needs different things at different times.
Yeah. And to thrive, you need to be in the right place, in the right conditions. I was really, yes, I have a very English garden here, and I put I'm like everybody else, down to the garden centre, bankrupt stuff.
Yes, me too.
And actually my garden has chucked an awful lot of those plants out because it doesn't want to grow them, because the soil isn't right.
I do the same thing.
But
I buy the pretty plants and they don't grow. My garden doesn't want pretty plants. I'm in Australia, in Adelaide. It wants hardy Mediterranean plants, but I want the pretty camellias. They keep dying on me.
Isn't it interesting that the garden grows what it needs and wants to grow? I
Yes.
just find, I'm in awe of nature. I just think that is so cool.
Mm.
And I think that's, as I said, as a metaphor to bring that back to us. And that's why I love what you do, you and Tim are doing. I just think it's just what I'd love to fly you over to England with your coach and the two of
Yes.
you go around the whole of I mean, it would just be so cool, but yeah, that's not going to happen. So
No.
Kat, thank you so much. I just find talking to you an inspiration of, we need to do these, we need to talk more about our food, we need to talk more about the technology, that the modern technology that's going into it, and bringing our farmers into our communities rather than just having them out there and doing whatever they're doing. I've no idea.
Yeah.
It's to know who they are and the passion that they have. I think that's the other thing, isn't it?
I agree. I agree. It's like a micro and macro. The macro, understanding that big picture scenario of what goes into it and what goes into producing large amounts of food. It's really incredible. But we can also do little micro things as well, like grow something from scraps on your windowsill. Or here in Adelaide, it's cold at the moment, but my son's insisted on growing a sunflower, so that's what we're trying to grow on the windowsill as well. But there are little micro things that you can impart to those around you around food production, and you can enjoy those tomatoes or you can enjoy that celery that you have grown yourself, and it gives you that connection and understanding of what it might take to grow the vast amounts of celery or carrots you see in the supermarket.
I think that's just the perfect place to end. Kat, thank you so much.